Today we're going to talk about a case that, well, it's one of India's most disturbing. It's truly terrifying, a story that's tough to get through and honestly even tougher to forget. We're talking about the Nithari Kand. And you know, that quote you just saw? It's not an exaggeration. Not at all. The details here, they really force you to look at a kind of darkness that, let's be honest, most of us just hope isn't real. And really, that question gets to the heart of it. It's the question the Nithari case left an entire nation wrestling with. And it's one of those questions that just sticks with you, long after you've heard all the facts. Okay, so to really get a handle on what went down, we first need to paint a picture of where this all happened. So imagine this, a totally normal neighborhood in Noida, a pretty standard middle-class area. You've got families, you hear kids playing in the streets, just that everyday rhythm of life. On the surface, everything seemed completely 100% ordinary. But beneath that calm, ordinary surface, something really terrifying was starting to take shape. It didn't happen all at once. It started slow. A child would go missing, and then another one. It didn't happen all at once. It started slow. A child will go missing, and then another one. At first, you can imagine what people thought, right? Maybe they just wandered off or were runaways. But it didn't take long for everyone to realize that something much, much darker was going on. And as more and more kids disappeared, a really chilling pattern started to become obvious. Most of the victims, they were from the poorer families in the area. So that initial panic, it turned into just widespread terror. The parents were desperate, and they started to think there had to be a kidnapping gang operating right there. So what did they do? They did exactly what you or I would do. They went to the police, they went for help. And not just once. They went again and again, just begging for someone, anyone, to please find their kids. But this is where the story gets even more tragic. The official response, it was just not there. It was completely inadequate. These families, their initial complaints were basically brushed off. The police were just so slow to do anything. And that delay, that critical, lost time, it just allowed this nightmare to keep going, completely unchecked. So months go by. It's not until December 2006 that the truth finally starts to come out. And when it does, it's in the most horrifying way you could possibly imagine. And when you look at this timeline, it really hits you, doesn't it? The sheer length of this nightmare. We're talking about the better part of a year that these families were living in absolute fear before a single investigation finally got serious and led to a breakthrough. So the investigation finally starts to pick up steam. They're focusing on the case of one particular missing girl. And that trail,
It leads them to a specific house in the Nithari village and to the storm drain that ran right behind it. And that's where they found something. Human remains. At first, they probably thought, okay, this is a single body. A terrible crime, for sure, but maybe a contained one. But they kept looking, and the awful truth just started to unfold. They found more, and then more again. The scale of what they were digging up was it was completely unimaginable.
And right then, in that moment, everyone realized this was not some kidnapping gang. This wasn't a bunch of separate, tragic events. No, this was something else entirely. Something so much darker than anyone could have possibly prepared for.
Okay, so that horrifying discovery in the drain, it set off a massive chain reaction, one that would finally expose who was behind this and send a shockwave across the entire country.
The police pretty quickly zeroed in on two people connected to that house. First, the owner, Maninder Singh Pander, and second, his domestic help, Surendra Kohli. And from what the police report said, the evidence was overwhelming. It all pointed to Kohli as the one who actually carried out these horrible acts. And once this news got out, it just exploded. It became a national firestorm. You had media coverage 24/7, and people were just horrified. Not just because the crimes themselves were so awful, but because of where it happened, right under everyone's noses, in a totally normal neighborhood. So what happened next? Well, the legal battles went on for years and eventually led to multiple death sentences for Surendra Kohli. But the impact on society, that was immediate, and it raised some really big, tough questions about safety and about who's responsible for it. And you heard this sentiment everywhere, from everyone. Just this deep, painful anger. The feeling that so many lives could have been saved if only someone in charge had just listened to those parents when they first came begging for help. So what's the takeaway here? What do we learn from a nightmare like Nithari? Well, the lessons are pretty stark, and they're crystal clear. Number 1, you can never ignore a missing persons case. Ever. Number 2, as a community, we have to demand immediate, serious action from the police. And number 3, and this is a big one, keeping kids safe isn't just a job for their parents. It's on all of us. It's a community responsibility. When you boil it all down, the Nithari Kand is just this chilling, unforgettable reminder. A reminder that evil, it's not always some far-off monster in the shadows. Sometimes it's living right next door, putting on a perfectly normal face every single day. And that really leaves us with one last haunting question to think about. This isn't just a story about something that happened back in 2006. It's about us, right here, right now. If a crime this huge, this horrible, can happen in total silence in one neighborhood, well, it makes you ask yourself, doesn't it? How closely are we really watching what's going on around us?